Hi, I'm Ryan, and you're watching Marlborough Minute here on WMCT-TV. The Labor Day Parade is a big event in Marlborough, and it takes a lot of people to keep it organized, keep it on track, and we are so lucky that for many, many years, Algonquin Amateur Radio Club has been a vital, important part of this parade, and I'm so excited to have in the studio today Ann Weldon and Eric Williams. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, before we get into the parade, tell me a little bit about what an amateur radio club does. Are we talking about radio that you listen to on AM, FM stations, or what are we talking about here?
Amateur radio is a FCC licensed organization, and you have to pass a written test. It used to involve Morse code for all levels, which it doesn't at this point. In Marlborough, the Algonquin Club has been here since 1976. They met in various locations. They met at Mitchell School, which is now the Boys Club. We met here at 91 Main Street, down off of the apparatus floor. We met at the fire station on Maple Street, and at this point we meet at the Whitcomb School in the library, if you go in door 1, on the second Thursday of every month except July and August.
Now, Eric, you're involved in radio in a very different way. You're helping the emergency management of Marlborough. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so amateur radio operators are all volunteers. And in the hierarchy of communications, say in the United States, for emergency communications, obviously there's the standard police and fire. There's a regular broadcast radio like your stations and all giving out information. What happens, though, is you always have to be prepared when some of that starts to fail or you have a major disaster. And amateur radio operators throughout the world are a vital part of that backbone of communications because it's all volunteers. They all have their own radios. They have them in their own homes and their cars and all. So when the cell towers all go down or the main communications dispatch gets, loses power, then amateur radio operators are then called in and to provide that emergency communications. So for Marlborough, with our emergency management, we use the ham operators in the town and the surrounding towns, and the Algonquin Club is our main contact for that.
So, pardon my ignorance, this is all pretty new to me. So do these radios bounce off of cell towers or or are they communicating directly with each other?
They bounce off of antennas or repeaters. We each have our own antenna, like our walkie-talkies have their individual antenna that sends the signal to another repeater or to another station at that point.
Interesting.
And I might add, so that's then becomes the local communications where it goes through the repeaters and all. But the amateur radio spectrum, the frequencies we have cover the whole spectrum, and many of the frequencies can travel worldwide. So when there's a major disaster, let's say there's an earthquake in Chile, ham operators will be there in Chile working with the Red Cross or the equivalent agencies there, and maybe passing information from Chile, say, to something in the United States, and then communicated to the served agency in the United States. So it's worldwide or it's local.
Now you said you have to receive some sort of qualification or certification to operate these radios, so it's not the standard Best Buy radio that you can get for the walkie-talkies for your kids. These are more high-powered professional devices.
These are formal tests that the FCC requires us to take. And you study for them either by yourself or you take a class or you have family that help you.
What's on the test? What's it?
Questions about frequency, test questions about the equipment, test questions about equipment that's used, diodes, transistors, the antenna wavelengths.
Yeah, how circuits work. You have to know how a transmitter works. The different components and like resonant frequency of an antenna and all that. So
right over my head.
But there's 3 levels of licenses. Mm-hmm. So you can start at the first license, which is called technician, and move your way up. And with each license, you get more privileges.
Now, is there a social aspect to this as well? Are you listening in and
yes.
having interesting conversations? How did you get started in the first place?
Well, I got started because my parents were in ham radio. And my children got interested in ham radio and then convinced me to do it, and my husband. And there is a social atmosphere of it at certain times, like there's a convention out at the Best Western the end of August. There's different groups on different frequencies that are friendly. We meet people all over the world. Some places, like I go to Maine a lot of the time and meet people up there that I know and I've talked with, and that kind of thing.
And when I was on the Facebook page, I saw that you all have a weekly night net. Is that the
Yes.
right term for
Yes.
it? What's a net mean?
It means that the Algonquin Club, well, we don't do it in the summer. We do it September through June. They meet Sunday nights on the repeater here in Marlborough to chat about what's going on, other activities happening. Do we have anything that we need to volunteer for? It's a social time, but it also is a time if someone has a problem with their radio, they can ask, and some of the guys will step up to help whoever needs the help. Because there are more knowledgeable people that have worked within the electronic field than some of us that got our licenses. And we survive, but we always have to ask for help at certain times.
Can you share any of the lingo with me? What you know you hear it's is it breaker
No.
and none of that stuff?
Usually use our own calls, because we all have our own call signs.
Okay.
That are assigned by the Federal Communications Commission. And we just talk normal talk.
Yeah.
I
no,
mean,
no
it's-
over and out. No.
No, not
No,
usually.
there's sets of abbreviations because originally in the first, ham radio's been around since, it's a little bit over 100 years now. And in the early days, it was only Morse code. It still is Morse code's used a lot. So there's a lot of abbreviations that were used in sending Morse code. It's sort of come back because now when people are texting and they have all these things, I don't know what, like LOL or whatever.
Yeah.
But for ham radio, there were a bunch of abbreviations used in Morse code. Because, for instance, in Morse code, if you wanted to say a laugh, you send HI, which is dit. So it's just a simple, there's some of those conventions.
And then your ear becomes attuned to
Yeah,
it.
so you just hear it.
Beyond
Yeah.
deciphering individual letters one at a time. If
Right.
you hear da-da-da-da-da, oh, that's a little laugh right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So if you're just sending something, you just want to make sure the person understood you were just joking.
You're just joking.
You just send dit.
Yeah.
So let's get down to parade business. This is serious stuff here. And I know the club has been assisting along the parade route for, we were saying
About
30 years?
30 years.
Wow. And what is their part in the parade?
The parade route is long,
It is.
lots of people. There's only so many police that can be spread out through that. And from an emergency management perspective, we look at this as like a training drill as well, because it practices this kind of exercise.
Yeah, let's get organized, and it's hopefully a low-stress situation instead of an emergency.
But it's done formally. I'll be located up at the parade start, and then I'll have a radio in my car talking to all the people spread out throughout the route, and there's about 15 of us.
15 of us.
15 spread out throughout the route. And then I'm coordinating that, just checking in with everybody, and then also have communications direct with the police. So that becomes just extra eyes and ears.
So you're the direct police liaison. So if someone sees something, they'll relay that to you.
Correct.
And then I relay it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then people are watching. So they're watching for, one thing that we watch is for the parade operations. So we track the timing as it goes through. Okay, so that's just gives you something for everyone to make sure that they're paying attention and watching and all.
Right.
But the other thing is everybody has eyes and ears along the route. So if they see something happening, usually there's a police officer close enough, they can just let the police officer know. But if there isn't, then they can call in and then I can relay that. So, maybe an ambulance call or something like that. If something serious happens, we switch mode and then we become in the emergency management mode. And now people will they'll get reassigned of what they do. And that might be opening up an area of the parade route and coordinating that to let, ambulances come in or something. Let's say there's a car accident or something. I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Or if somebody falls off one of the bicycles that's in the parade, or they get hurt at that point, then we go to Eric, and then the dispatch either sends the ambulance or the cruisers, whatever happens to be.
So that's a
that
pretty
time.
specific example. So I'm guessing things do happen every year.
Sure.
Has there ever been anything too serious?
I don't think so. I mean, I think people have been sick along the parade route.
Sure.
We've had to call in and,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But other than that, it's been very low key.
But it's primarily the police are there. I
Right.
mean, they're doing most of
We
it.
just
But
call in if we see it, and they're not right there to do it. Because there's the police are so spread out. And if you look at the map that we gave you, it shows you where police and everything are located. And that gives us an idea of where we can find help at the time we need it. Because I'm usually a block and a half from where a police officer is.
It's
But we know where
such
they
an
are.
exciting and important event for Marlborough. This is the big day when everyone turns out.
Absolutely.
And it gives you a sense of pride to not only get to enjoy the parade as a spectator, which I'm sure you get to do, enjoy all the marching bands
yeah.
and politicians strutting their stuff, but to, in a way, be really an important part of the parade, knowing that you're there with the police and if something should go down, you have that communication and that passion for communicating that you can really
Yep.
pull in.
That's absolutely true.
And there's many other events. If you look at the Boston Marathon, there's ham radio operators all through that. So on the buses that are moving people, there's an operator there, so there's communications. At all of the first aid stations, there's ham radio operators there. And each of those would be a separate, the net, a separate net coordinating that. Because something over 26 miles, it takes lots of people.
It does.
Well, thank you for all that you do. This is really exciting, and we're going to go to a safety meeting in just a bit to really make sure we know what the plan is going forward. But for those who are watching, and maybe this is their first time hearing about amateur radio, any tips, any ways that you'd say this is how you can get involved?
Go on to n1em.org on the website, and there's email links to the offices if they would be interested. And we do meet the second Thursday of every month, starting in September at the Whitcomb School. Use door number 1, and we're there, hopefully, depending on what COVID says at that point, whether the school's allowed to have meetings in it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. That brings us to the end of another episode of Marlborough Minute. Yeah, it was more than a minute, but I hope you got a really awesome taste of some of the wonderful things people are doing in your city. Take care.